The Young and the Restless spoilers full episodes next week February 9 to 1/3/2026. The preview clip does not unfold like a typical transition scene or a simple bridge between story beats. Instead, it feels like a quiet confession layered with threat. A moment where intention finally surfaces and the audience is invited to understand just how far things have already gone. Mariah Copeland, seated across from Dominic Newman, Abbott Winter's chancellor in a worn, almost forgotten roadside diner, is no longer merely reacting to chaos but actively explaining her next move. And that distinction matters. This is not a woman improvising in panic. This is someone who believes she has found clarity in isolation. The diner itself feels deliberately chosen, tucked away from the highway, the kind of place people pass without noticing. A liminal space where time seems suspended and choices feel reversible even when they are not. Dominic, still trusting, still calm, asks why Mariah has refused to tell him where they are going, and her answer is chilling not because it is overtly violent, but because of how grand and detached it sounds. Calling the diner the best hiding place in the world and promising to take him to an entirely new country reframes their flight as an adventure rather than an abduction. A narrative Mariah appears to need in order to justify what she is doing. In her mind, secrecy is protection, distance is salvation, and geography itself becomes the solution to a psychological crisis. Mariah's belief that she can simply take Dominic across borders exposes the widening gap between her perception and reality. On the surface, the idea feels implausible, even naive, especially given how closely the situation is being monitored and how many people are already searching for them. Yet the more unsettling possibility is not that Mariah genuinely believes international travel is feasible, but that she is deliberately oversimplifying it for Dominic, or even for herself. When someone convinces themselves that escape is just a matter of distance, it often signals a deeper refusal to confront consequences. There may indeed be other tricks she is considering, other contingencies she has not voiced, plans built on false documents, hidden contacts, or sheer desperation. But even if such plans exist, the emotional truth remains the same. Mariah is trying to outrun an internal collapse by projecting certainty. Dominic's continued obedience underscores the tragedy of the moment. He trusts her, plays along, and for now treats the situation like a game, but games always end, and children eventually ask harder questions. When the novelty fades, when hunger, fear, or confusion take over, Mariah will be forced to confront the reality that control is fragile and borrowed. The diner scene quietly foreshadows that turning point, the moment when Dominic stops being compliant and starts being scared, a shift that could unravel Mariah completely. While Mariah clings to her version of escape, the fallout from Victor Newman's schemes detonates elsewhere in Genoa City, most notably in Nikki Newman, whose emotional collapse becomes impossible to contain. Nikki initially believed Victor's so-called fake kidnapping was some twisted but brilliant maneuver, another example of him manipulating fear as a strategic tool. But as the layers peel back, the cost becomes undeniable. What once looked like a calculated bluff now appears reckless, cruel, and uncontrollable, and Nikki is forced to reckon with the reality that Victor has crossed a line even she cannot rationalize. Her rage is not just directed at Victor, but at herself for ever believing that this would remain contained, that people would not get hurt, that pretending danger could not summon real danger in response. Nikki's fury is compounded by helplessness. For perhaps the first time in a long while, she does not know where to turn, which is why her decision to seek out Jack Abbott carries so much weight. Nikki going to Jack is not merely a plot convenience, it is a symbolic retreat from the man she has defended for decades. Jack represents the one person who understands Victor's methods intimately, but does not excuse them, someone who has been both Victor's greatest rival and his most honest mirror. In seeking Jack's help, Nikki is tacitly admitting that Victor's actions have spiraled beyond her ability to manage from within the marriage. She is no longer trying to mitigate damage quietly. She is looking for an external counterforce that alone signals a major shift in the power dynamics surrounding Victor. Nikki's devastation is rooted not only in fear for Dominic or Mariah, but in the realization that Victor's obsession with control has metastasized, infecting every corner of their lives. Her anger burns because it is mixed with grief, the grief of knowing that loving Victor has once again placed innocent people in harm's way. That sense of escalating danger is reinforced by the ominous development involving Kane Ashby, who now appears to be taken hostage and unconscious. Kane's predicament ties directly back to Victor's broader strategy, where intimidation and misinformation are used interchangeably. If Kane has indeed been captured, it transforms Victor's manipulation from psychological warfare into something far more tangible and violent. Kane's unconscious state strips him of agency entirely, turning him into both a victim and a bargaining chip. This development reframes earlier doubts about whether Victor's threats were exaggerated. The appearance of Kane as a hostage suggests that the situation has crossed into real criminal territory, where fear is no longer manufactured but enforced. It also raises urgent questions about who is holding Kane, under whose orders, and how far Victor is willing to let this spiral go before it becomes irreversible. Taken together, these threads paint a portrait of a story accelerating toward catastrophe. Mariah's calm certainty in the diner contrasts sharply with Nikki's unraveling rage and Kane's helpless silence, yet all three are bound by Victor's gravitational pull. Each character is responding differently to the same force, Mariah by fleeing and reframing reality, Nikki by confronting and seeking allies, Kane by becoming collateral damage. Dominic remains the emotional center of the storm, the one person everyone claims to be protecting even as their actions endanger him further. His obedience in the diner is heartbreaking precisely because it is temporary. The show lingers on his calm not to reassure the audience, but to heighten the dread of what comes next. In classic fashion, The Young and the Restless uses these parallel crises to explore a familiar but potent theme, the illusion of control. Victor believes he can orchestrate outcomes through fear. Mariah believes she can escape consequences through distance. Nikki believes she can contain damage through loyalty. Kane believed he could protect his family by negotiating in good faith. Each belief is being dismantled in real time. The diner, the hostage scene, Nikki's visit to Jack, all feel like pieces of a larger warning that no one is steering this story anymore. The next moves will not be planned. They will be reactions, collisions, and revelations. As Mariah outlines her next step with unsettling confidence, the question is no longer whether her plan will fail, but how spectacularly, and who will be standing closest when it does. Diane Jenkins Abbott's discovery does not arrive with noise or spectacle, but with the kind of quiet intimacy that is often far more destructive in Genoa City. Because it exposes emotional truths that were never meant to be witnessed. Spoilers for The Young and the Restless during the week of February 9th suggest that Nikki Newman finally reaches a breaking point and turns to Jack Abbott not for strategy or leverage, but for solace. And that distinction matters. Nikki confesses that she is afraid of what Victor Newman will do next, and the fear in that admission is not abstract or hypothetical. It is rooted in the realization that Victor's recent actions have crossed from manipulation into something reckless and potentially irreversible. When Nikki asks what happens if she cannot endure this anymore, she is not merely venting frustration, she is voicing the unthinkable question that has hovered over her marriage for years. What if loving Victor becomes more dangerous than leaving him? Jack's response is instinctive and human rather than calculated. He pulls her into a comforting embrace, offering safety in the most immediate way he knows how. It is precisely that moment, stripped of politics and rivalry, that Diane Jenkins Abbott walks in on, and the timing could not be more volatile. Diane's entrance freezes the scene into a tableau of misunderstanding and implication. From her perspective, what she sees is not context or confession, but proximity, vulnerability, and physical closeness between two people whose history is long, complicated, and never entirely dormant. Diane has spent much of her recent life fighting to secure her place beside Jack, to be seen not as an interloper or a temporary chapter, but as his present and future. Walking in to find Nikki wrapped in Jack's arms threatens that fragile sense of security, because it taps directly into Diane's deepest fear. That Jack's emotional loyalty to Nikki will always eclipse any commitment he makes to someone else. Even if nothing romantic is occurring, perception becomes its own reality, and Diane's discovery instantly reframes Nikki's crisis as a potential threat to her marriage. The damage here is subtle but profound, because it does not require betrayal to feel like one, it only requires the appearance of intimacy at the wrong moment. At the same time, this scene quietly amplifies the stakes of Nikki's marriage to Victor. Nikki's fear is no longer theoretical. And her decision to confide in Jack rather than confront Victor directly signals a shift in allegiance that Victor would view as unforgivable if he knew the full extent of it. Nikki's question about not being able to take it anymore suggests a woman standing at the edge of emotional exhaustion. Someone who has spent decades rationalizing Victor's behavior and is now confronting the possibility that there may be no line he will not cross. Jack's embrace, witnessed by Diane, becomes a symbol of refuge, of an alternative emotional reality where Nikki is not constantly bracing for fallout. For Victor, even the suggestion that Nikki might seek comfort elsewhere would strike at the core of his need for control, and this moment, once exposed, threatens to fracture their marriage in ways that cannot be easily repaired. While emotional earthquakes ripple through Abbott territory, the situation surrounding Kane Ashby takes a darker and more ominous turn. Kane is seen in Victor's presence, unconscious and lying on the ground, a visual that immediately escalates Victor's campaign of intimidation into something far more dangerous. When Adam Newman enters and reacts with shock, asking whether Kane is gone, the ambiguity of Victor's silence becomes chilling. Victor does not offer reassurance, nor does he clarify Kane's condition, and that refusal to speak is as calculated as any threat. Victor understands the power of uncertainty, and allowing Adam to wonder whether Kane is dead or merely incapacitated serves his interests far better than a clear answer. The image of Kane unconscious is a deliberate message, one aimed not just at Adam but at anyone who might doubt how far Victor is willing to go to protect his empire and reclaim Newman Enterprises. The question of whether Kane has been kidnapped, gravely injured, or killed outright hangs heavily over the scene, yet Victor's demeanor complicates the interpretation. He does not look like a man who has just committed murder. There is no visible panic, no urgency to conceal evidence, no hint of regret. Instead, he appears controlled, almost contemplative, as though Kane's condition is a piece on the board rather than a moral crisis. This suggests that Kane is likely alive but incapacitated, deliberately rendered powerless rather than eliminated. For Victor, death is a blunt instrument, while fear and leverage are far more useful. An unconscious Kane can be used to terrorize, to coerce, and to force compliance without crossing the irreversible line that even Victor understands would bring consequences he cannot fully manage. Still, the visual itself is enough to shake Adam and raise alarms about Victor's trajectory. This development has immediate and far-reaching implications for Nikki's marriage. If Nikki learns that Victor has allowed Kane to be harmed or abducted, her fear will crystallize into certainty. This would not be another moral compromise she can rationalize as business necessity. It would be a clear demonstration that Victor is willing to physically endanger lives to achieve his goals. Nikki has long balanced love with denial, telling herself that Victor's ruthlessness is contained, directed outward, and ultimately manageable. Seeing or even suspecting that Victor has crossed into kidnapping shatters that illusion. The emotional confession she makes to Jack suddenly feels prophetic rather than reactive, as though her subconscious already sensed that Victor was spiraling into territory she cannot follow. The parallel timing of Diane's discovery and Kane's apparent abduction is not coincidental. Both moments expose Victor's influence in different but equally corrosive ways. In one, his actions drive Nikki into another man's arms, not romantically but emotionally, creating cracks in a marriage that has survived countless storms. In the other, his machinations leave a man unconscious on the floor, a living warning to anyone who underestimates his resolve. Together, these scenes suggest that Victor's grip on power is tightening even as his grip on Nikki weakens. A dangerous imbalance that could cost him the one relationship he has always assumed was unbreakable. For Diane, the fallout is personal and immediate. Her trust in Jack is tested not by infidelity, but by the realization that Jack's instinct to protect Nikki remains deeply ingrained. Diane may tell herself that what she saw was innocent, that circumstances justify the embrace, yet insecurity has a way of rewriting logic. The seed of doubt is planted, and in Genoa City, such seeds rarely remain dormant. Diane's reaction, whether silent or confrontational, will inevitably complicate Nikki's already fragile emotional state, potentially pushing Nikki further away from Victor and deeper into isolation. As for Kane, his fate becomes the ticking clock beneath all of these emotional confrontations. Whether he is alive or dead, conscious or not, his condition represents the tangible cost of Victor's obsession. If Kane survives, he will carry the trauma of being used as a pawn, a reminder that Victor's threats are not empty. If he does not, the consequences will be catastrophic, legally, morally, and emotionally, with ripple effects that would engulf Nikki, Adam, and the entire Newman legacy. Victor's silence in the face of Adam's question is therefore not reassurance, but a warning that answers are coming on Victor's terms, not anyone else's. Taken together, these revelations paint a portrait of a man whose tactics are finally outrunning his ability to contain the damage. Victor may believe he is acting to protect what is his, but the cost of those actions is becoming impossible to ignore. Nikki's fear, Jack's comfort, Diane's discovery, and Kane's unconscious body all point toward the same conclusion: Victor Newman is approaching a point where power and love can no longer coexist. Whether Nikki chooses to endure or walk away, whether Kane wakes up or not, and whether Diane confronts what she saw or lets it fester. The aftermath of these moments will redefine alliances and loyalties across Genoa City. The most unsettling truth is that Victor may still believe he is in control, even as the evidence suggests that control is slipping through his fingers, one shattered relationship at a time.